Okay. All right, so let's do some discussion on so this is the Internet of Things panel. We're going to talk about Internet of Things. Got a few questions I put together, but also maybe there's some questions from the audience. But just to get started, question I've got for first of all, let's have the panel members introduce themselves, maybe starting with Nahum. Just a brief introduction.
My name is Nahum Gershon. I'm not an engineer, and I don't like the term the Internet of Things, and I'll talk about it later.
Okay. Go ahead, Lee.
And I'm Lee Stargner. I'm a part of the IEEE Internet of Things Initiative, and you can read more about it at iot.ieee.org.
Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Coughlin. I'm Editor-in-Chief of the IEEE Consumer Electronics magazine, and I was actually building connected things in the mid-1990s. So I've been kind of waiting for the Internet of Things to happen for 20 years, and I'm still waiting, a bit like a Samuel Beckett play.
And Philip.
Okay, I'm Philip Hall, Principal Fellow, Adjunct Professor, if you like, University of Melbourne. I'm also on the SSIT Board of Governors, who, as what we call a horizontal society, the Society for Social Implication Technology, is interested in all things technology and how it impacts society. And we have become quite a strong partner with the Internet of Things conference series that's being run. And of course, our aspect is looking at how that technology does impact society and how we use it for the good of mankind.
And I'm Tom Coughlin. I'm president of Coughlin Associates, and I'm also do a bunch of stuff in IEEE. I've been involved in the Consumer Electronics Society for several years. I'm currently the chairman of the Consumer Electronics Society Future Directions Committee. In addition to that, I'm also director of IEEE Region 6, which is the Western United States. So just to get started here, and I think you can see we got a number of interesting opinions here, just even from the brief introductions. How will we manage our digital things? For instance, how we keep all our things charged and up to date with firmware updates, etc. And what do we do with our dead things? So maybe let's start with Phil, if you've got a comment on that.
Well, I was just wondering, listening to some of the presentations, and particularly one this afternoon on energy harvesting, when we'll have dead things in the future. I think we might have lost things and how we can find them, but it's going to be quite interesting to think about what do we actually mean by dead things. If we think about obsolescence in terms of software and what the Internet of Things is doing for us, I think we're going to see some rapid change. It's going to be very difficult to keep up with the applications or the whatever benefits we're using. Well, I'll stop short of saying toys on the Internet. It's going to be rapid change of pace, and I think there'll be things that fall away into disuse, and I think that's probably a better way of saying it rather than dead in that context. I think dead maybe they go uncharged or they are not kept alive.
It could also be things that go obsolete. For instance, if I've got a whole mess of sensors.
Yeah, and I think that's really where we're talking about is that, and some things we're probably not going to realise they're obsolete because we've just stopped using them, and maybe that's a context of what obsolescence actually in the context of Internet of Things is.
Peter, I know we talked a little bit about this.
I think I can be quick here. I think I need to see some live things before I can discuss dead things. And as I said, I've been waiting for 20 years to see things that really make sense. We could pop up a picture later of Mother, you know. We've seen some of her relations.
We've seen very strange things, yes.
So we could have a quick chat about Mother at a later point, but yeah, I'd like to see some live things before we worry about dead things.
All right.
Designers are getting quite clever at several ways, making the devices very small, making the devices require very little amounts of power, and being able to power devices just with the electricity in the air that is available from the local FM station. So as we commit and deploy tens of billions of these devices around the world, they'll be hidden. In many ways, they'll be forgotten about. Things change at work. Things change in life. And by 2050, 2060, when we're supposed to have 50+ billion of these devices talking, who knows, maybe 5 billion will just simply be lost out there as things change. So, and they're all trying to phone home at the same time. So it could create issues with network security, certainly network bandwidth. These lost, forgotten devices could be a problem. Kind of like the trash in space that we've created.
Well, also, I think Vint Cerf and, wasn't it Steve Wozniak also recently talked about, all this digital stuff, if you lose the encoding, the operating system, you can't access it. It may still exist, but you can't use it anymore. I mean, so there's a number of ways you can take that. Nahum?
Well, I don't charge them, I just throw them away, okay? No, I'm kidding, of course.
That's a lot of phones.
The what?
That'd be a lot of phones.
A lot of money. I suffer, actually. And and talking about charging, Fitbit, in its infinite wisdom, have a charging wire, a different one for each device that they put out, okay? And if one for the watch, you cannot charge while you wear the watch because it goes perpendicular from under the watch. So there are lots and lots of problems, but I think I agree with you that you have to find ways to use the energy in your body that goes to waste, or the energy in the air to power the devices, and probably that's what's going to happen in the future. The Apple device, you see the Apple Watch that I wasted $800 for this. You have to charge it every night, so it cannot measure your sleep, for example. So, problems.
Yeah, the whole charging thing, if I've got a whole bunch of things, they all have their own batteries. I was just thinking about the microgrid keynote just a little bit earlier, and thinking about that. If you can think about that as some kind of a wireless charging grid for all of your things, that might be, something like that could be a way perhaps of getting around that issue. Another question.
No, before that.
Yeah?
The audience, do you have any opinion on this? On this question? You
Okay.
must have.
Let's go on the next. We're just getting them warmed up. Wait, no. Okay. So how new is the idea of the Internet of Things? What's the history of this concept? I know there's a bunch of people that have opinions on that. Peter, let's start with you on this.
Well, I wrote a paper in 1996 called Connecting CE-bus Networks to the Internet. And I think about a year later, we developed that concept. We built a whole object infrastructure. We built and implemented objects, and we demonstrated the first transatlantic thermistor.
Transatlantic thermistor?
Yeah, first transatlantic thermistor. Yes, all the way from Galway to the east coast of America.
A thermistor, okay.
User interface on the east coast and the thermistor on the west of Ireland. But,
That's for controlling the temperature is what that is, right?
Yeah, I think one of the problems, and at that time, my whole idea in integrating Internet of Things, connected things with consumer electronics, we had to have a user interface for things. And we built user interfaces in Java in those days, and they were smart enough to be able to detect, the thermistor and link with it. But unfortunately, they couldn't, even though they complied with the CE-bus standard, they couldn't connect with a lot of industry devices, because nobody in industry at the time was actually sticking to the standard. And today, we have even more standards telling us how everything's going to work. And I think that's one of the problems, Industry keeps seeing this as a pot of gold, but everybody keeps trying to grab their bit of it, and everybody is basically confusing the waters more and more.
So we have a lot of standards to choose from.
I think that's happened before in the 1990s. I think it's going to happen again now. But
Lee, you have an opinion on that?
Well, actually, I've got a background in automation and process control, so I've been doing these types of systems for decades. But fast forward to today, the difference in what I was doing with a Foxborough system or a Rockwell system 20 years ago, today, the sensors have gotten very cheap, very small, very reliable, very able to transmit true information from the point of sensing. The real-time networks are fast, they're cheap, they're non-proprietary. Plus, as we generate petabytes of data, we can process the data in real time and in fast enough to affect what you just measured. So it's been around for a while, but that perfect storm has given us the ability to greatly expand the amount of things that we could monitor and have an influence on through control.
Nahum, What do you think? Is there anything new in the Internet of Things?
Well, I have trouble with the term Internet of Things. Some people call it Internet of Everything. It includes also humans.
I think
If you don't include humans, you get situations where engineers design things that are not actually for use for humans. They say they are. And tomorrow, when you come to the keynote that I'm going to give, I'm going to talk about experiments I've done where companies that put tracking devices don't think about how human beings operate. So I would rather call it the Internet of Everything and include humans and maybe even my dog. If I could put a sensor on my dog. It's not a thing, it's a dog. And go with it. Otherwise, we will be too much focused on machines and not consider about the human needs. There is an article in the New York Times, by the way, this week saying the Internet of too many things. Okay, so that's my thoughts about it.
So the Internet of Everything, I think, is the term that Cisco has liked to use on this. Phil, what do you think?
I tend to agree with Nam, but I think the concept's been around for a long time, but maybe not necessarily. I think I need another cup of coffee. I think the concept's been demonstrated in some even the early sci-fi movies, in 2001 Space Odyssey and things like that, and then it came really out of science fiction and the artistic world, where they envisioned such a concept. It took a while to catch on, and I think telecommunications back in the 80s and 90s, when they started to explore with multifunction devices with one user interface. And the concept, of course, going back to, I think it was what Peter was saying, I believe, was, you had a user interface for every application. Now we have one user interface for multiple applications. So I think we've actually started to bring some of the science fiction to reality in that context. But I do agree with Nam that it really is, and we should not ignore the human interface. It's all, and I think there's already been sensors put on dogs too, so in that context. But I think his point's very valid, and certainly from an SSIT point of view, that's really what we're interested in, is where the human sits in this loop or in this space.
I think the thing that maybe has changed is that, the things themselves are getting smaller. We've got a lot further with smaller lithography, smaller devices, putting more capability on something that's pretty tiny. And so I think these are particularly useful where you may have, for instance, sensor networks or things of this sort, that is actually an awful lot of machine-to-machine communication that goes on. Ultimately, there is something that means something to people comes out of it, but it's the enabling things that can work together to maybe generate energy or to gather information and then put that information in a system. So while the concept isn't new, I think some of the things that can be used to implement it have been developing and are very different today than they were in the past.
Yeah, but it's not just the human and things. For example, sometimes you see a married couple eating breakfast, and each one is on their device, and it looks that each one is married to his or her own device more than married to each other. Human beings take some of those devices, consider them as part of their own, okay? Like, for example, you drive a car and somebody hits your car, you say, you hit me. Not you hit my car, you hit me. And the same thing, those devices become smaller and smaller and touch to you. You think they are your eyes, they are your ears. So that's why it should be everything.
Oh, everything should be connected, huh?
Everything should be connected.
Okay. Are there any questions out in the audience, things you guys are interested in or thought about the Internet of Things? Yes, Richard. Security, that is one of my questions, particularly about privacy and that kind of thing. All right, let's ask that question then. What are the privacy concerns we should have with the Internet of Things, and how can we mitigate these issues or ensure that people get the privacy that they should get? You want to start, Nahum?
It's not an easy question. It's a very, very, very difficult question. It's not just privacy. It's privacy. It's a main concern. With everything we do, even with your computer, you have problems with privacy. Somebody can hack into your devices and lock you out of your house or lock you in the house. Okay, you will not be able to get out from your Internet of Things lock in the house. It can send you, if you're on a medical device, can send you the wrong signals, can kill you. Okay. We don't need guns, actually. We don't need gun and gun controls. We can kill you with the Internet of Things. There are lots of issues. There are also things, for example, I thought about it last night. There was a paper yesterday about an automated Internet of Thingy, a medicine cabinet. If you don't take your medication on time, it will tell you and tell your doctor he didn't take the medication on time, or his medication expired, he didn't replace it, he took one pill and not two pills. How do you know that the doctor is right? Okay, doctors are often wrong, and I tend to argue with my doctor. I don't take their advice like they're saints.
No.
No.
You don't argue with your doctor.
Yeah. When they ask me what type of doctor, I introduce myself as a doctor, ask me what type of doctor are you? I say a real one, a PhD. So, and then insurance companies talking about privacy can go on you and they will stop your insurance because you didn't take the wrong medication that the doctor prescribed you, and they know about it. So that's a question of privacy related to your question.
So Lee, maybe in particular with regard to transportation and being in vehicles and stuff, can you talk about privacy concerns there and how we might deal with that?
It's actually very scary. There was an article today that said that Google's fleet of cars can be hacked with a laser pointer because the LiDAR system is on top of the car. And it's something that the car manufacturers are going to have to solve. There are other examples of people being able to drive by a vehicle and take control. And it's been very real. So security and the ability to keep your control over your own car realistic is going to be a challenge. Are there ways in which to prevent hackers from taking over your car? Not in the near future. I think it's going to delay any potential deployment of automated or autonomous vehicles for a while. And there are groups that go beyond simply standards groups right now trying to find ways in which these very smart cars can remain under your own control.
Are there ways that are emerging that they can effectively deal with that, you think?
It's a black art right now.
So we're going to see the teasing of things being something. Okay.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, when you get to privacy, I think we're probably seeing the answer start to form in recent months, certainly in the last half year, when Apple and Google have both kind of revised their internal security keychains and things. They now encrypt everything. I think the NSA isn't too happy about some of this. But we're starting to see the big companies now become very aware and brought in two-factor authentication and realize they've got to protect their customers. The answer to the IoT question, I think, lies in the same place. Apple has a HomeKit system now, and in fact, they're insisting on people putting very strong encryption into devices to get approval to work with their system. But there's another side to this, and maybe we'll get another take on that in a second. What you're basically doing is you're now trusting your privacy to large corporations.
Well, that sounds wise.
Now, whether that's a better approach than not trusting it to anybody and having the NSA know about it as well as God knows who else is a good question. But I think that's actually where it's going now. The big companies have realized this is a problem.
That's kind of
even at the smartphone level, but I think I feel they're seeing a future here in building up other things around this, and I think that's where we're heading.
That's kind of because a lot of this stuff ends up in the, quote, cloud, which is somebody's data center, right?
That's probably, again, they're trying to suck us up there so that they own us. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know.
This is not a new thing. Some years back, Mercedes top-of-the-line cars had an infrared key system for their cars, but some clever folks took ancient Palm Pilots that had an IR interface and programmed it you could hold it up to the Mercedes car lock and it would just go through a lot of combinations really quick and the car would unlock. So this is not a new problem, it's an old problem. And like I said, it's going to be a black art to find something that can stay ahead of the bad guys.
So, Phil, I imagine that since you're interested in you're leading the society on social implications of technology, you probably have some opinions on privacy.
Well, absolutely, and it does go back to the ethics side of what we're using the technology for, and of course with every good application there's also a sinister or not so good one. I think there's several aspects to this. First of all, the way things are moving, we certainly, as the victim, if you like, we have to know that our privacy is being compromised. I think that's going to be a big challenge because we're not going to necessarily find out directly how much it's been, when, and how much until it appears in some shape or media by accident, unless because most of the privacy issues are really about our data being used to manipulate our choice of buying a product, like sales and marketing. Already now when we visit a website or something like that, within less than 24 hours, not even that, if we go to look at the local weather, we're getting ads for the hotel we just booked in Berlin, for goodness sake. So is that a form of privacy invasion? I think it is. The other part on the other side is what's the real intent of the person who's stealing or taking the data or using the data? If it's to sell something to you, is that an invasion of privacy? If they're trying to blackmail you, obviously. So it does open up some concerns there about how much information that people is being put up there that they're not willingly putting up anyway on social media like Facebook. I know at the conference in Boston last July, there was a presentation by Bruce Schneider, who is a cybersecurity expert, and he said the NSA doesn't have to look too far. I mean, most of what they want to know, people put up on Facebook and social media anyway. In fact, the challenge is surfing through it. Are we going to find that our ubiquitous devices are posting to our Facebook page what we're thinking? Now, is that where we're going to? And I'm sure that could be done through BCIs.
Well, not only that, but then we will go up on those pictures and identify who's in them, right?
Right.
So it'll help Facebook know what people look like.
So I think there's, and then of course then there's a security aspect to it in terms of being hacked, and I think that's I'd like to see the discussion about security and hacking separate to privacy, because I think they're two separate issues, although they do have a common interface.
Okay, thanks. Another question, go ahead.
It's about security and privacy. I have a question on, of course, security is different as privacy. Privacy is void for someone can sniff my information. Security is when I vote that someone attack me. But the question is, do you believe that the engineers that design system or design Internet of Things void the security? Or why the reason the engineers don't take account the security as a main or subject to develop the solution or the whatever about the internet?
So, let's see, so is your question about do designers take into account privacy and security in designing the products, or?
No. Or yes, this is my question.
Is that what it is?
Why the engineers don't take account the security and the privacy as a main subject to develop the system or to develop the solution or to develop the gadgets that everybody uses?
Oh, okay, so the question is, why don't engineers take into account privacy and security issues when they design stuff? Okay, who'd like to talk to that one?
Maybe I could jump in on, just following on from my keynote yesterday on drones and consumer drones and the social implications. The technology, like take a GGI Phantom, and I think there's a display out there, for example. The issue of security is certainly considered by the technology developers and the manufacturers, there's no doubt about that. And there's lots of work. But with respect to, say, drones, certainly the manufacturer is not worried about that because that's a use of the technology, so it really becomes an end-user issue. Okay, so then it comes to the regulator. So how does the regulators regulate the industry that this technology is being used in? And in the case of drones, the Federal Aviation Authority, for instance, in the US, and Civil Aviation Safety in Australia, for example, in fact, most countries I know, the Civil Aviation Authorities say, privacy is not our issue. We worry about public safety in the airspace, and therefore we worry about how the technology is being used in its normal context. right? Now, but if you use that recklessly or with intent to invade someone's privacy, you need to be aware of the privacy laws around invasion of privacy, right? Which is not technical. You could stand there and look through someone's window, or you can photograph them with a camera from a drone. The issue is you're still invading someone's privacy. You're just using technology to do it. And I think that's an example of how it would apply with respect to the Internet of Things. So as engineers and technologists, we build a capability with the understanding that it's really up to the user of that technology that they use it responsibly. And I think that's really where I was getting to.
Okay. Anybody else have?
You've got a lot of devices these days that have sensor, controller, and networking in a little box of epoxy for less than $2. To add security to that device is a cost increase. The design and life cycle of the device is sometimes less than a year or so. So people, and the fact that there are no real universal standards is something that, yeah, they should have done it, but couldn't afford to and didn't have time.
We think the answer, in a sense, may be let's embed some sort of agreed upon security and privacy into the chips, that sort of thing, and therefore it comes with them.
If they can afford to do it in the price they hope to sell it at. It's a business model that doesn't always support security.
And then you want to make sure someone doesn't request there's a backdoor in there. So
Yeah. Yes, at the same time, the governments and police are asking for backdoors.
Right.
And who's going to protect those keys?
Peter, you got an opinion on that?
Well, like I said, I think the big corporations have turned to themselves these days. I think security goes beyond the device. I mean, it's kind of multi-layered. It's sitting at different places in the network.
But do you think engineers, designers are thinking about security and privacy when they design their products?
Not today.
Not today, okay.
Not today, no.
Okay, Nahum, do you have anything on that? You don't have to.
Well, security is a big problem in anything, okay? And there always will be the Snowdens, you know? There always will be hackers, and I don't know what the answer is.
Okay. Do we have other questions?
Don't think anyone does.
Yes, I think we're trying to figure this out. I've got a question for you. So I think the Gartner hype curve, right, it shows Internet of Things is the top of the hype cycle right now, right? Just about ready to go to dive down into the valley of disillusionment, if I remember the terminology correctly. Do you think the Internet of Things, as we currently conceive it, that it is on the verge of becoming a significant technology, or what do you think is going to happen in the next few years?
Well, if you listen to some of the things that Gartner is saying, the top of the peak right now is actually getting a little wider, because at the price point and at the technology level that these IoT systems are offering, it's like the old adage of as the price of the computer goes down, you can do more with it, and it opens up additional fields of business. We're just at the beginning of the curve to instrument and control manufacturing plants and buildings and retail and transportation and forestry and on and on and on. So if there are any entrepreneurs in the audience, now's the time to take double E technology and go make a fortune with it and hopefully do some good at the same time.
Okay. I think I see. Are you moving up so you can talk?
Could be.
Go ahead.
I think Internet of Things has some roles and use cases, and I think I can see Lee is more enthusiastic about it than I am. I will put that because he's coming from an industrial background and environment. And in fact, in industry, in areas like transportation and urban infrastructure, I think you will find a lot more well-defined use cases. You find places where you can justify economically putting in specialized networking infrastructures and things. I mean, I'm coming from, the technology to build it has been there for 20 years. Right? So I'm coming from a background where if you want consumers to accept it, it becomes a much bigger challenge. Because consumers, are very unforgiving. They don't want to have to think about something. They don't want to have to configure it.
It just has to work.
They want it to work.
Yeah.
They want it not to need to be charged or have batteries changed. They want to make sure that, it doesn't take up more time looking after it than it actually provides benefits for. And I can think of, a lot of interesting use cases and a lot of practical and very socially impactful use cases, but none at the moment that makes any sense in a consumer context.
Is that because of the cost of the product right now, that consumers tend to buy things
It's
at
got
lower higher prices?
nothing really to do with the cost
Okay.
of systems. It's got to do with simply with the utility and the correct
actual usefulness.
presentation.
Okay.
I mean, we've had this device Mother. Maybe I should throw up a few slides at Mother just to talk about something.
Is the other
in a minute.
keynote speaker here, the last one? I'll tell you what, if they don't show up in the next 5 minutes, if no one complains, we'll let
Okay.
you do your talk.
I'm sure a product may come along that will change all of this.
Is
but
he here? Go ahead.
Right now, today, I don't see that there's anything significantly different, except for the smartphone. We've got the smartphone, which is, and again, I mentioned Apple's HomeKit, and that sort of approach may change the ballpark. But right now, today, I don't see anything compelling that would make me say, oh, I need those devices in my home.
Right. Okay.
And I got loads of these type of gadgets, but if
So you think it is
we're looking at
overhyped?
the smaller level stuff.
So you're thinking it actually is overhyped right now?
I think if I looked from the industrial context, no, there's a lot of use for
Right,
industrial
right.
uses. But if I look from the consumer electronics context, from the consumer's perspective, yes, it's about to slide into the valley.
Yeah, and I think part of it is it's kind of like it's utility at a certain price, that industries and companies are willing to look at a longer-term amortization of the costs, it's sort of like versus the upfront cost. If you're taking over a period of time, what can it do for me and what's my return going to be? Whereas consumers might, it's they're a little more sensitive to the upfront price a lot of times.
I don't think it's price. I mean,
okay.
smartphones succeeded because they bundled about 10 other functions into one.
Yeah.
Right? They took lots of things that we had to have lying around.
Plus all the apps that turn them into
Yeah.
other things too.
Yeah, so, and you can do, it's a camera, it's God knows what else, it's
Yeah.
anything you want it to be almost, right?
Okay.
And you carry it around with you. So it simplified your life in that sense. You didn't have to have lots of things lying around. Now, in another sense, it's one of the first successful Internet of Things devices because it is a connected device. Okay? But I don't see any other use case in the consumer context that comes anywhere near the smartphone.
Phil?
It's rather interesting listening to this part of the discussion because only recently, last 12 months, I had a similar discussion with a student I was mentoring, and as part of choosing his master's degree topic. And I commented that we were soon to see the death of the mobile phone, and in the iPhone and smartphone. And he said, I can't even imagine that. And I said, well, and I think it's only a matter of time that we see the word phone dropped from smartphone. And it might be smart terminal, it might be some other name. But it's become, as you said, Peter, a multifunction device. It's more than just a phone. And soon the market will get round to realising that they can click on to, whether it's the Internet of Things concepts, to actually start to market this more as a multifunction device. That is one thing it does, it acts as a telephone.
Right.
It does so many other things. So I think it's really going to be part of the generational move as the new generation starts to move in, who already embraces this at a very early age. The generations like ourselves, we're at the leading edge of it as it came through and part of its development, or we're kicking and screaming with it like I did. But I think as the generations move through and this is part of their just normal upbringing, they become familiar with it, I think the concept that will flatten off. It'll just become part of everyday life what it does. And until something bad happens with it, and it'll have to be bad on a big scale, and I think that leads to one of maybe your next or question you've got on the list. But I think it's reality. It's the hype part of it, I think, is slowly dissipating out of it. The reality is setting in, but I think we're ready for it to be looked for what it really is, and that is an interconnected array of applications that's accessed through something like a smart terminal that we have in our pocket or Wear or whatever.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Regarding to the comment of Peter, you can say that maybe the phone is part of the Internet of Things, but actually that the command center could be. okay? I can have a device sitting on my nail, doing something in my heart, in my legs, on my pet, the air conditioning, the thermostat, and I can see everything here. So I don't see any conflict between that, but just different function.
I'm
So of
looking
course, it
forward-
will not be, a device on my nail will never be a command center. It doesn't have a big enough screen here.
I'm looking
Okay.
forward to when they put in 3D printers and I can actually print a glass of beer at 5 o'clock. That would be real cool.
Is that an ale or a
Yeah.
pilsner?
And as far as hype, I'm not concerned about hype. We all live on hypes. Hype is actually a good thing, could be a good thing. And nobody said that nobody actually measured and found out actually the Gartner curve. People look at it like it's the Bible, like given by God, right? So yeah, so it's hype now, it go down and then will go up. So what? But it's here to stay because, we have the capabilities, we have benefits, problems like security, privacy, but some of the stuff will stay and we will get smarter, like we have privacy and security with computers too, and they still exist, we still use them. So we'll find ways around it and we will live happily ever after. We're the internet of everything.
Well, Tom,
Yeah.
right about now, if you fast forward over to San Francisco to their downtown convention center, Apple's holding a big product announcement. In fact, it's
The new phone, I
a
think.
suite of
Yeah.
products.
Yeah.
I'll bet there's a few things on that stage, and they're all internet connected that will make you say, I want one of those. And just walk around the hallways of this conference center here.
They've been
You'll see
fairly
a-
good at that,
See a
actually.
few surprises, and then
There is some interesting
they're
stuff.
not all based on smartphones.
That's true.
Right.
I think we have another question here. Go ahead.
Could be the Internet of Things push the development of the virtual reality?
A virtual okay, will the Internet of Things impact the creation of virtual reality devices? I sure hope so, because those big Oculus and things like that are really big and heavy. So do you think that virtual reality and those kind of applications will be enhanced by things we're calling Internet of Things?
Me?
You could be.
Well, I think the reason the Oculus is kind of looks, it's not that heavy. The reason it looks big is because it's got to generate the same optical
It's
kind
got to
of
be a certain
quality.
distance from your eyes, right?
Well, it's got to generate the same quality,
Yeah.
and more importantly, if you're in a virtual reality and you're moving, and objects are moving, you actually need very fast frame rates. So, I was talking with someone earlier today, the mobile phone's now capturing at 240 frames per second. But to do the Oculus correctly, I mean, you're around 1,000 frames per second.
What do they do now, do you know?
I don't know, I think it's in that ballpark.
Is that ballpark?
It's
Okay.
certainly hundreds of, 800, 900.
But will we be able to get, will the Internet of Things help us in some way with?
Well, I think there are two different things you're talking about.
Yeah. It's
You
not,
know,
it's
I mean, you're
not-
trying to create a virtual environment that's as real or close to being real as what you see now.
you know what I think it
And-
could be, though, is
yeah.
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that as you move and things are moving in that environment, virtual objects, that's actually a very tricky problem. It's a very technical problem as well, so.
But I think it might, one thing I'm thinking that maybe this is kind of getting at your question is, could I use virtual reality and other ways of looking, sensing stuff to be able to interpret things that come from other sensors and devices in an area to, for virtual reality or for augmented
What the problem?
reality?
What the problem?
What's the problem? No, I'm just, so one of the thoughts might be, will there be something that, say, the virtual reality could enhance in terms of the way we used these things, for example?
I'll give you one good example.
Go
It's
ahead.
already begun.
Okay.
You've got a medical problem because of a car wreck or something. World-class surgeons aren't always nearby. Right now, telemedicine is allowing, the best of the best to operate on people elsewhere in the world. So has the ability to transfer back the experience of what the cutting tool or whatever is doing back to the surgeon, it's going to get better and better.
So you're saying that connected technologies, maybe combined with some kind of virtual reality, could help people to do things?
Yes. That's just one example.
More of an augmented reality in that sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But we'll still like to have the person-to-person contact with the doctor. The experience would be very different. I think what you allude to, that in case of emergencies, you go in some remote island in the Pacific and something happens, so you can transmit you vital signs and description and images to your doctors. At least we could give you some advice.
So I've got another one here. And this I think this relates to sort of the privacy and also another concept out there, which is the idea that in addition to what we often call the cloud, being all the data in data centers, there's something called edge computing or fog computing, things of that sort, where it's a lot more localized interaction between devices with processors on them. Do you see that, and the thing I'm wanting to know in particular, do you see that most of the things associated with Internet of Things are going to be going on in the cloud, or is there going to be some level of processing and storage and information that will remain at a localized level versus being in the cloud, and perhaps even could be presented to something outside of your immediate control in some anonymous fashion? Do you think that might be, that those are possibilities, or the technology available to do that?
Well, I think video, it doesn't make sense to send tons and tons of video back to the cloud if you can process it at where you're acquiring it. So, yeah, that's certainly an area where I think edge computing is going to be important. And we've already, our devices detect faces and can do a lot of things with them, in fact, I'm working with a professor. I do work in digital photography and camera design and stuff like that. He made the comment to a bunch of my students recently, he said, digital photography, he said, a picture is no longer the reality you perceive at all. When your camera works, everything is actually changed by the time your picture is captured.
So you may not be able to use it in a court of law. You may not actually...
Well, I mean, consumers don't want to do that. They want everything to look nice. They want themselves to look nice, so...
Okay.
So there's a lot of processing that can be done even before the image is compressed or sent on the network.
And it seems like
And
also...
that data can be used as metadata for a lot of other things, and that's a good example of edge computing.
Well, in the car, I think is another one where essentially the cars themselves should do some processing. If I'm trying to load everything up into the cloud, that could chew up a lot of bandwidth. Do you have any comments on that? Is there value in doing localized processing?
Really?
I was talking about Lee in particular,
Okay.
for cars and those sort of...
Well, I can tell you right now, there are cars about to come off the production line that can see through fog, can see around corners. They can see through the car in front of them to see that obstruction that the car in front is about to hit before them. So that kind of reality displayed up on your windshield right in front of you is a here and now kind of thing.
So, but in a sense, this also means you don't necessarily need to load everything into the cloud. You're going to have some localized content.
It's basically a mute question, actually. I mean, in the cloud or not in the cloud, what is it important? When you have capability to store it locally, it's advantageous to store it locally. When you'll will have to store it in the cloud, you store it in the cloud. So I don't see any big issue with this, okay? As devices become more powerful, there'll be maybe more storage. You can store more things. And sometimes you don't want to store it there because of maybe privacy issue. So I think it's a non-issue, actually, to me.
Phil, what do you think?
Well, I was just reflecting back that, internet probably came from the words of, integrated networks anyway. If we go back, it was just a modern derivation of that. And as it grew, we just started to hang more things off that network to make use of it. And of course, technology now has enabled us to still have that integrated network, but not just joined by hardware in terms of cable. So I was just thinking back that one of the early clouds might have been the mainframe computer that all our terminals hung off of cables at our laboratories, wherever we were. So, we've had the concept around for a while. I think locally it's going to depend on, whether we see the cloud and the connection to it as mission critical for what we do, and that might be a corporation by corporation basis. And also whether we do local processing of the data and then upload the results to the cloud for others to see. So I think there's a number of ways that we will learn the best way to use that. I think it's going to be a bit of trial and error.
Could part of those deal with some of these privacy issues, you think?
Well, certainly processing data locally will address some of the privacy issues, but at the end it's filtering up. If you're putting up results, you may be actually protecting the raw data, which is still back on your local system. And I think for some applications that may be where it may even be regulated to go, that you hold on to the personal data bag, but because you need to share some of the results with doctors at hospitals or other parts of the corporation or banks, whatever, that might be the way to go. And it may not necessarily be real-time data. It might be sort of quarantined for some period of time and come out like a monthly report or something. So it gets away from the immediacy of the data, where real-time data could be used as a security or privacy point, whereas age data or collected or collated data and reported is almost useless to anyone who wants to do something in real time maliciously or in a privacy and security context. So I think there's a number of ways that, depending on how we use it and why we want to use it, we could also mitigate against some of the issues that go with that.
Okay, thanks. Other questions out there? Did you have one earlier, Richard? Okay. So how will the Internet of Things change social networking and the interactions we do with each other? Is it going to make it, will it help? Will it make that different? Will it actually be distracting from people interacting with each other, like a lot of our devices are now?
Send me the question by email.
You mean you want me to text it to you?
I'll-
So how will the Internet of Things change the way we interact with each other?
It's not just a global Internet of Things, it depending what device. I mentioned with cell phone, how it changed the way we interact with each other. You see people in a room, they're all into their devices. If I have an Internet of Things thing implanted in my ear that I could listen to my girlfriend or my wife.
Or both?
Or my,
Oh,
yeah, or
please no.
both at the same time, yeah. You know, of course it will change the life. If I have a device that maybe injects some kind of food into my bloodstream, for example, right? So maybe I will not going to eat. Yeah, it will affect our life, and it will affect the way we interact with the world. Right now, we have many people who don't interact with the world anyhow. They interact with the devices. One guy said, I no longer need to go outside to meet people. I can all meet them at home. And now with the Internet of Things, or with the phone, if you call it Internet of Things, become more possible. Of course, technology, you know, Churchill said once, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. So we invent all those technologies and at the end they also change us, and somebody else change it also to technology. So it will change us. Already did.
So how do you, Lee, what do you think, how do you think the Internet of Things or this kind of technology
All of the above. The
changes?
ability
Okay.
to find people with great ideas and build upon them. The ability to discuss with people anywhere in the world your problem. Whereas if you look back just a decade or two, you know, we were all relatively isolated unless you had some world-class university library down the street. So anybody now can get to people, can get to information, can get to answers that otherwise would have been trapped, you know, 10,000 miles away and never ever able to help you or even help the medicine that you need for your own kids.
But you just look on the positive sides. You get good information, you can also get bad information.
Well, yeah.
And you can get bad ideas and bad interactions. So it works both ways. Okay?
Peter, you're smiling.
I'm sorry, I just got this thing in my head. I can't get it out of my head, so I have to say it. The scene in that movie Demolition Man, I don't know if you've seen it, Sylvester Stallone, and who was the actress? Was it Sharon Stone?
Sharon Stone, wasn't it?
Yeah. So she comes in to Sylvester Stallone, she says, you want to have sex? And he's there going, yeah. And then she comes back in with these two VR headsets. Okay, if you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. No, it's not Woody Allen.
No, but there was a Woody Allen, film that has the
A
same.
similar one, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
the Orgasmatron, I think.
Okay. So, yes, so the Internet of Things may change our lives in ways perhaps we would prefer not to change them.
Okay, Phil, how do you follow that one?
Well, I think, as I mentioned before, we had embrace these new technologies and concepts fairly readily these days, and until something happens. And we really haven't had so far, and we also have a concept that real time is now important for everything. Right? So if we become so wedded to having information or results or the use of these applications that give us real-time gratification, if I can put it that way, right? What happens when the network is congested and there's a delay of an hour? And we just imagine our SMSs at the moment. Sometimes you don't get one because it got held up and away for a day or even a couple of hours, and you didn't get it to tell you that the meeting you were going to go to in an hour has been cancelled, so you've turned up and wasted your time. And I think we're going to come to, some sort of roadblock there in terms of our willingness to do this if we start experiencing or having bad experiences with the Internet of Things. And I mean that in the sense we've become so reliant and expecting of it, that we become disappointed with it to the point. And maybe we should be putting more research and more effort into having smarter networks that is able to carry the volume and the load of millions of people expecting real-time, instant gratification of what they're trying to do. Otherwise I think we're going to hit a brick wall somewhere.
That brings up an interesting point. Maybe you're the best guy to talk about that. How is this kind of technology going to change us or our expectations of life, and is it a good thing or not?
Well, as I said, I think we've moved to a point already, particularly with the generations now coming through, in the 20s and 30s, and probably not so much the 40-year-olds plus, where they already have that expectation of real-time gratification or expectation of fulfillment. And also they're the ones that, from a privacy point of view, are quite willing to put out there all the details of their every meal they take, everything they think. So having a BCI interface, for instance, that enables that to go straight out to Facebook is probably going to be cool until all of a sudden someone hacks in that and changes the thought and puts something else out, or maybe they feel as though they've lost control of it. So I think somewhere along the line, we're going to get, too clever for ourselves, and secondly, a little bit too ignorant of what we really are prepared to accept and what we're not to accept until it's too late or it's done.
Now, I don't think Stephen Dukes is in the audience here, is he? But apparently he tells me he wrote some paper back, I don't know, was it in college or not, but he was talking about, implanting a chip in your head.
Yeah.
They have an interface with your brain.
Yep.
Right? And then the question he had was, how would you know that the thought you've got was your own or given to you by somebody else?
Right,
Yeah.
and exactly. And that also flows through to command and control systems, autonomous vehicles. I mean, are we putting our efforts into those systems being able to detect, a command from a foreign source that we didn't expect it from? Drones, cars, whatever. And on the BCI, in the June issue of the SSIT magazine, TNS up the back, there is a very good article by students, PhD students out of Washington State about deep brain, and it's all about BCI stuff. But they've got a follow-up article coming out in the September issue based on a paper they gave at the Norbert Werner Conference in Boston last June. And that really is about BCI hacking. It's a fascinating read and recommend to. But as I said, we can get too clever for ourselves. Where there's a good application of the technology, be aware there's also a bad application or a potential bad application for it. And that's the back doors we've got to continue to work to close. And not necessarily let someone have the key too easy.
Thanks, Phil. Any other questions out there?
I have an answer.
Oh, you have an answer. Go ahead.
It may be a little late to affect the lives of Peter and Lee, but we've got a planet that's rushing towards 10 billion people right now, and many of them are on the move, going from one place to the other. How are you going to identify needs and move resources to that many people in a time frame that can help them or save them? Yeah,
So
all this connectivity is going to be essential to the fate of the planet.
So it's like
years ahead.
humanitarian applications, things of that sort?
Yeah.
For instance, yeah. Okay, that's good. You got it.
Let me ask a question. How many people in the audience are working in an area that directly related to Internet of Things? 1, 2, 3?
Let's try this one. How many people aren't working with something that could become part of the Internet of Things? That will not become part of the Internet of Things? Anybody? Okay.
Okay. By the way, if you would like to write a paper, the IEEE has a newsletter on Internet of Things. Send them an article. Okay. The same link that you gave, there is or you can send it to me. I'm in the editorial board, and I could forward the article. My email is schmooze@mark.com.
So, do we have is a keynote speaker here? Didn't show? Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, then maybe, would it be okay if Peter has an Internet of Things presentation, which is pretty cool.
Stay in touch.
So maybe we could have him do that after this.
Oh, maybe we've had enough Internet of Things.
Maybe enough Internet of Things? Okay.
I got other presentations.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that you think that you would love to see done, something, an application that you think the Internet of Things could help to make that possible, what is it and why would the Internet of Things be useful in doing that? Nahum?
Well, one thing which is very practical, I have a security camera at home, okay? It's connected to the internet, but it doesn't know if I leave home or I come back home. I always have to remember to turn it on, turn it off. Why somebody cannot come up with a commercial grade level that once my cell phone goes out of the control area of my Wi-Fi router, it will send a message to the camera. And most cameras that you get them in the market now, in the consumer market, don't do that. I'm sick and tired of turning it off when I come home and turn it on when I leave home.
So you want to have a camera that you can interface with, is that it?
It's a very simple solution. Once my router detects that I left with, my cell phone left its reception area, it will send a message to the camera and turn it on.
Ah, okay.
And somehow manufacturers,
Call Tim Cook or write an app for it.
the what?
Write an app.
You could
Yeah.
probably, he's saying you could probably do it with an application.
In principle, yeah.
Yeah.
What's your
Actually-
email? Maybe you could write the app for me. How about that?
You need a cloud service.
There are cameras right now that are under $200 that can learn the occupants of the house. So if you're away or somebody different comes in, it will know it, and then you've got ways of setting up how it communicates that fact somewhere
And
else.
how would it recognize that it's not you?
Pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition, okay. The Nest doesn't do that. The Nest, the whole ecosystem, the Nest, they
I
don't
can
do
point you to some of these newer cameras.
that. Okay.
So, Lee, if there was one thing that you would like to see happen, or some kind of capability or an application, you think the Internet of Things would be useful for it, what would that be? The most useful thing that you could...
The beginnings of it is out there right now, which is around energy management. If we could manage more of the energy we're using right now, we wouldn't waste as much, and we wouldn't need to build as many new devices and systems to make more energy.
So energy management, you think, would be the
Yeah.
extremely useful application? Okay.
Yes.
How about you, Peter?
Oh, looking after old people at home.
Oh, that's a good one, healthcare.
Yep. Well, it's a little bit more
Not
than
just
healthcare. I mean,
Yeah.
we make smart video appliances that
So-
can check on, healthcare workers use something called activities for daily living, right, which is a metric to figure out people can look after themselves. We could get smart video devices to stick at home that could
So
do
you
that.
do like Mom after all? You do like Mom after all?
I do, yeah. Okay. That's,
How about an app
That's
to
an
write
insight.
articles for your magazine? And then you wouldn't have to bug the rest of us.
how about a virtue in me to take over the editorship?
Thanks, Peter. So, Phil, what's the thing you'd like most?
Well, as we put more and more things out there on the internet, the greater the cybersecurity problems grow. And for me, we need to solve or get better at protecting what we've got out there from hackers and stuff. And that's a huge task, never ending. There's no simple solution. So I'd like to see that we are able to protect, if you like, what we've got out there from a cybersecurity perspective. I applaud my bank when they can detect an attempt to fraud on my credit card when I'm on the other side of the world, and through their systems. It would be great if, some of the systems that we do put out there have got inbuilt, checks and balances that do detect potential cybersecurity threats. And I'm not talking about Norton or McAfee virus software either. I'm talking about real cyber attacks that alert us that there is someone actually trying to do it, and maybe recommend what we do. But the more we put out there, the greater that problem's getting.
So sort of real-time security capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With obviously an alert back to us as the owner of the data, if you like, and in that. So that's not an easy problem to solve. It's a real dilemma. And whether we're going to use it for autonomous vehicles or flight, if we go to more of using the internet for civil aviation stuff, which is a big discussion, the more vulnerable we're getting. And people are getting clever at hacking just as we're getting clever at putting things out there on the internet. So that's what I'd like to see.
Okay. So to the conference chair people here, should we, so let's see, how many people would like a really cool talk on the Internet of Things in the room here?
Well, Steve, where are we at, Stefan?
We don't have time?
25.
Oh, are we supposed to end in 7 minutes?
To go.
So we actually used up all the time?
Yep.
Cool. Should we get one more question from the audience?
We're good at that.
Oh, Mohammed, you've got a question out there, surely. I promised I'd ask you.
Everyone's got a question, they just got to squeeze it out. Okay, Richard.
Have we got any better terminology than Internet of Things?
Well, no one said a bit of everything, but I personally, if I can answer that one, I think that term's going to drop away eventually. There'll be another term that replaces it, I'm not quite sure what, but as I mentioned before, to me, it's just a current way of saying an integrated network, except it's more about, modern types of that, and just as we hung applications off the old systems integrated networks, we're still hanging applications off now online systems and online networks. We've just got rid of the wires, where technology has enabled us to put more stuff out there and continues to do so.
So maybe I stuff.
Or the I or the E, whichever way you want to look at it, yeah. So, I think only a matter of time before the terminology of IoT fades away and something else takes its place. That's probably more relevant or appropriate. I'm looking at it as a buzzword type concept at the moment. Buzzwords fade.
Someone else have any comment on what this thing, whatever it is, would be called in the future?
Well, back in the 1990s, I thought it should be the Internet of User Interfaces, because things aren't any good without a user interface. So I'd still say that could apply today.
Okay. So
you plug in an anonymous thing out there somewhere.
IOUE.
Maybe.
How about you, Lee?
Well, like my partner said, it is truly becoming the Internet of everything. As we can measure and sense more things than we've ever been able to, and collect the data and process it, and hopefully do some good with it.
Okay.
It's not so easy as it sounds.
Sorry?
It's hard to analyze small data. It's much more difficult to analyze big data. And it's very difficult to know what data is good, what data is bad.
I agree.
Okay? And you will hear tomorrow, I urge you to come to my keynote talk tomorrow. You will hear some examples of experiments I made with some commonly sold fitness devices, and they don't deliver. I have 2 Fitbits in my pocket, the numbers are not the same. So here we go, okay? The quality control of industry and the amount of testing they do is actually, it's under what actually would be good. And the trouble is that when you come to medical devices, if they behave the same way, we're in big trouble.
Okay, thanks everybody for participating in the panel.